Welcome guys, gals and non-binary pals to this week's episode of Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary and feminist perspective. My name is Joel, I'm one of your hosts. With me as always is your other reanimated host,
Brian. Hi.
How are you doing this week, Brian?
Yeah, fine. It's kind of warm.
Yeah.
Not enjoying that too much.
And you're yellow.
Yeah, I'm wearing a yellow t-shirt. I'm testing it out for work.
It's unusual.
Yeah, it's not a colour I'd usually wear because it's not, muted like browns, greys.
Yeah, it's very cheerful. I don't know what's making it at all.
Yeah, I won't wear it very much, don't worry.
So we're here, speaking of topless monsters, we're here to talk about Adam, the end of his arc in season 4 episode 21 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Primeval.
Yep.
A word which I eventually realised is not actually related to the word evil.
When did you figure that out? Earlier today?
Years ago, but not too many years ago.
I do not know what the eval part of that means. Is there any connection to medieval?
Yes, I think it's an evolutionary or progressional stage kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so we're here to talk about Primeval, which is the conclusion in all substantive senses of Adam's arc, but the penultimate episode of season 4 of Buffy.
Sure is.
So do you want to kick us off with your Buffy summary?
I don't, but I will. This is season 4 episode 21. It was directed by James A. Contner, who last directed New Moon Rising, and written by David Fury, who last wrote The Iron Team. That was actually also directed by James A. Contner. Interestingly, apparently Margie Noxon was brought in to write the scenes between Buffy and Willow in the elevator shaft, which I actually think was probably some of the best scenes in the episode.
Yeah, appropriate.
Okay, so here's your Buffy summary. Buffy guesses Spike is working with Adam. She persuades the others to get over their differences. Adam tells Riley he has a chip which Adam controls. He will join Adam and Forrest as cyber demonoids after a battle between demons and soldiers gives him spare parts. Buffy and the gang blend into a super Buffy which defeats and kills Adam with help from Riley and Spike, whom Adam has double-crossed. The initiative is shut down. I just found out there that apparently if I want to read some of that out loud and do a decent job of it, I can do it by looking forward, but I can't actually understand any of the words that I'm reading out. So
whatever you need to get the job done. So I have established an etymology, Brian.
Oh yeah.
So primeval is Latin, of all things, or Latin derivative, and means the first age, where medieval being the Middle Age, and is distinguished from primordial in the sense of primordial just means happening in the first sequence. It's a broader sense, but primeval specifically means an age or an epoch or an era.
Okay.
So which is actually specifically very relevant here, which we'll talk about. But Buffy references that the power of the Slayer is primeval, and specifically she's going back not to the earliest time in history, but to the first Slayer. Yeah. So it's actually super appropriate.
Great, love it.
So in terms of bronze banter for this week, an oldie but a goodie, a retro watch of ours, a film which many people have seen and many people have misinterpreted. 2005's adaptation of V for Vendetta.
Yeah, we watched it on Saturday. It was great fun.
Yeah, it's
directed by the Wachowskis.
Directed by the Wachowskis, which I, to be honest, I far too long into actually watching the film, I remembered, this is a Wachowski film, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense in terms of what I'm seeing.
The campiness of it all. Yeah,
but it's if anyone isn't familiar, so it's a adaptation of Alan Moore's seminal graphic novel, which is kind of about a fascist post New War Britain, essentially, where there is a ethno-state that has risen out of a white supremacist group called Northfire, which is taking over the country, and it's meant to be very 20 minutes into the future, this could be us, what if it happened here, etc., all that kind of stuff. Very well liked by a lot of people of a certain nerdy disposition, I think, at the time, for its slick presentation, for its memorable characters, for its action sequences, and its really strong iconography, because as we know, unfortunately and effectively, fascism tends to have quite strong visual imagery, which people tend to still either fetishize on first principles or not engage with and be like, that looks kind of striking. And yeah, so it was fun to revisit. I definitely was very compelled by the film when I watched it as a teenager.
Yeah, same.
And I was very much, I think we were keen to rewatch it for a couple of reasons. One was it's obviously been a very long time since we've seen it, but you also wanted to see, does this stand up?
Yeah.
And is it going to be cringeworthy in terms of this theme and its presentation or not? But also I think something which, both drew us to it, and also for me personally kind of maybe warded me off a little bit, is that at the time the film came out, in this future where there is increased government regulation of a country due to the balance of power shifting in the aftermath of a pandemic, and there being a rise of neo-fascism in the West and increased subjugation and segregation of minorities, including censorship and specifically including subjugation of queer people. At the time in 2005, all these themes existed in the world, but it was very like, imagine if it got as bad as this. How could it get as bad as this? It's a bit maybe closer to the actual news cycle at the moment, so I think it's kind of a little close to the bone, as it were.
It was touching a nerve a little bit.
It was a bit familiar as opposed to unsettlingly,
unrecognizable.
Yeah, those kind of alternate histories are meant to feel for want of a nail, and this was more kind of in 6 months' time.
It's like for want of a nail, i.e. a bit of like steel that you hammer through something. This one was like, clinging on by your like fingernails, want of a nail kind of thing.
And fascinating, I've talked about this before, is that the original graphic novel shares a lot of the relatively quite a lot of the context and a lot of the themes of the film for an adaptation, but which was based primarily in themes which were relevant to Margaret Thatcher's Britain, and something that Alan Moore...
That makes it sound like it was a book she wrote.
Yeah. One of the things that Alan Moore said over the years is that the precipitating event which allows the fascist government to take control in the graphic novel is a limited nuclear event, a limited nuclear war that happens elsewhere in the world, which Britain wasn't part of. So it basically, that's something as catastrophic as that would be what would be necessary to galvanise people into actually handing over control to this new government, and that he'd realised in the intervening years that it doesn't actually require something quite so as a single imminent dramatic event. It can be a long slide over a longer period of time. And then specifically in the film, it is that the government or certain elements within the government orchestrate a slow, gradual removal of civil liberty, accelerated by a pandemic which they themselves introduce into the population. So a lot of mix of salient topical themes, and also potentially like chemtrail conspiracy theories.
It really reminded me of, specifically watching it, the stuff by the school really reminded me of, it wasn't a scandal, we had some idiots causing a ruckus on Twitter a couple of weeks ago in Ireland because the new Minister for Children is, and also inclusion and something else.
Equality.
No, I don't think it was equality. Anyway, is a man called Roderick O'Gorman of the Green Party, and basically someone found a picture of him online at a Pride event with a activist from the UK who made some like really stupid remarks like 20 years ago about lowering the age of consent for situations where it's two children kind of thing. Anyway, lots of absolutely ridiculous stuff, but essentially a brigade of Twitter idiots went after the Minister for Children. But yeah, the kind of the sensitivity of like
both specifically by virtue of the fact that he was
he's a homosexual.
This is relevant to the conversation.
So basically, really original suggestion by these bigots is like, he's a gay, maybe we should suggest that he's actually a paedophile.
Minister for Children, Disability, Equality and Integration.
Okay.
So all the good stuff, really.
Yeah, all the stuff we like. But yeah, so like just a kind of sensitivity around like what you need to push people in certain directions and act incredibly irrationally is talk about children a lot of the time, and they're, I thought that was really salient.
There's an exceptional piece in it where V, who's the protagonist, who is really just a cipher for all of this political or this civil unrest and civil disobedience, speaks directly to the public and says, that he understands why they did it. It wasn't, for a lot of them, it wasn't intentional. It was piecemeal. They were afraid. They didn't know what to do. And they just didn't speak up, and just how gradually it can kind of bring people to a centre, So I just thought that was very, very relevant. A beautiful film in many ways.
Yeah,
visually
like
very, very good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would, if you have the stomach for it, if you're the kind of person who can play The Last of Us 2 at the moment, I think you can probably revisit V for Vendetta.
No doubt. Okay, so Buffy the TV.
Segue for me. What's your segue?
My segue is that the military-industrial complex is bad in V for Vendetta, and it is also bad in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Okay. So this is the episode. It's a really, really unusual episode for this show and for shows in general, in the sense that our series or season storyline, which is Adam, the initiative, very aggressively comes to conclusion in the penultimate episode of the season, leaving the finale, which is coming next week, be a almost a postscript to the thematic a thematic postscript to the season, which barely even takes place, but is Restless, one of the best episodes of the TV show, one of the best episodes of TV in general, I would suggest. So yeah, really unusual structurally, this episode, and I would suggest a bit of a appropriate whimpering conclusion to a season which has felt directionless and had some really standout moments, but ultimately really lacked a punch.
You and I, in watching this season, were rapidly paying attention to a specific point and waiting for this point to have it clarified, which is what Adam's plan was.
Yeah.
What the plan was. And I'm saying I have to crystallize this so I remember in 10 years that specifically his motivation was that supposedly Professor Walsh's plan was to create a new kind of being, which was a integration of the adaptiveness, the intuition, and the intelligence of humans without the emotional quote unquote weakness, and with the physical and morphological strength and variety of demons without their rigid inability to escape their kind of rituals and all that kind of stuff. And that Adam and that Riley played some, to be honest, entirely ambiguous role in this new society as his counterpart, and that Adam wanted to create a massacre inside the initiative between the soldiers and the demons, which he's flooded the initiative with, using the Slayer as a balance to ensure that the humans didn't get killed too quickly, so he would have enough spare body parts to make a cyborg demonoid army to make over the world.
It's not great. I mean, obviously in the rest of the seasons we get a lot of like bring hell to earth. That's a pretty good like goal.
The next 3 seasons are all end the world.
End the world, yeah. I mean, Willow specifically takes the attack of like end existence, which I really respect. And then the first also wants to bring hell to earth. Gloria wants to bring hell to earth.
Well, in fairness, Gloria wants to go home, in doing so she'll bring hell to earth.
yeah. So it's a lot of hell to earth, and I think they return to it for a reason. It's because it's a better fucking like goal than I want some juicy man buns that I can like stitched together with all these like Sicarian demons. Tasty.
Particularly when we're seeing some of the demonoids and the demons in this episode, and they don't look up to much.
Yeah.
But Adam, some positives about Adam. He has a distinction of being the only big bad in either Angel or Buffy who never puts a top on.
True.
Like, he's literally, his entire appearance, he is just a tall man in a pair of trousers with the shirt off.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is unusual. His characterization, even through this episode, is this. He's characterized through his entire presence in the show, which is not extensive, as this just like bizarrely like calm and chill dude who's also like killing people.
Mm-hmm. And even this episode, he didn't really get all that flapped when Buffy does become Mega Buffy, I think they called in the summary, but obviously Uber
Buffy.
Buffy. When she comes Uber Buff, he doesn't seem all that like worried about her. He's not like, oh shit. He's like, that's unusual, and then she rips his
uranium 235 core.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So in terms of what actually happens in the episode, there's a lot of plot heavy episode.
Yes.
Many scenes. So we have there's a lot of just faffing about with Riley being in the Initiative secret lab, and Buffy going to explore the caves where Adam was, accidentally running into Spike. Spike does some great work in this episode in terms of like almost like slapstick, because what I really enjoyed was that the plan was to use to separate Buffy from her friends and use the encrypted information on the discs to lure her into the Initiative for her role in this plan. But Spike does it in the wrong order, so Buffy can't get the information from Willow to go into the Initiative.
What I read about that was that apparently it was a production error. Like, they were like, oh shit, we gave this to Willow to get Buffy into the place that was Adam's plan, but we didn't actually like allow there to be any space where Willow tells Buffy this information before they stop talking.
Yeah.
So they had to like improvise.
You need to whiteboard this kind of stuff, yeah. And then, once they're actually... there's the parks I think work well are the parks where the Scoobies are figuring out that Spike has manipulated them. They're kind of apologising to each other. Initially, when they come together to deal with this, I was concerned that they were just going to move on and not address the things that were said. But as you said, luckily there's scenes with Buffy and Willow later on which kind of address it more fully.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, address it fully for Buffy and Willow, which I think is the most important relationship in this season in terms of a breakdown. But the like Willow, Xander and Giles, nothing for them. Like, Giles isn't even physically present for any of the reconciliation. He's like hanging above them, and Xander just kind of gets in on the tail end for a hug.
Yeah.
But the reconciliation between Buffy and so the structure of the episode is Spike's causing shit. Buffy realizes he's stirring shit basically, and so they plan to go to the Initiative. But wait, the Initiative?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. But they have a plan in place, so they're kind of more comfortable doing so. They get there. They're climbing down an elevator shaft to get there.
Abseiling,
and Buffy and Willow have a really nice moment going down there. We'll talk about that in a minute. They get there. They do a spell to make all the Scoobies give their power to Buffy, so they can all be one together, and calling upon the first Slayer's power. They punch Adam, punches his guts out, and then the mostly off screen and in a montage, the fight for the Initiative, the battle for the Initiative happens, where 40% of the Initiative dies.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the episode. So yeah, the elevator scene I thought was very nicely written, very touching. Basically, Buffy and Willow do the thing that we kind of can trust them to do as good characters, which is just do a little bit of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, listen, like you didn't, and Buffy's like, I didn't mean to make you feel, I know this has been weird, I didn't want to make you feel isolated or lonely, and you've been going through something so big, and I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you during it, i.e. becoming a gay. And Willow's like, no, you were going through a lot, and it was so difficult for you too. And Buffy's like, yeah, but also I was just obsessed with having sex with Riley, so sorry about that. And they have a big hug and they fall down the elevator shaft. It's really nice.
And die. End of show.
But it was just very nicely written, very, very lovely reconciliation. And I would say that scene made me realize that I haven't really felt like I heard Buffy or Willow, or I felt like I haven't heard a gang interaction which was genuine and present and kind of like what we love of the show in a good while in the season. That could be structural in the sense that could be like, a reflection of it.
Partially intentional.
Yeah. But it also was like, oh, this was missing.
Yeah. And no, absolutely. I agree with you on that. And I think that it actually speaks to what we consider to be one of the core values of the show, which is showing that Buffy doesn't have to choose or schedule when to be vulnerable and ostensibly what's often considered to be feminine or emotional. and to be strong. So as much as her strength comes from the people around her, how does she connect with those people around her? By being emotionally available. And I think by having those kind of scenes happen, as much as there is a lightly comic element to it, but having those scenes happen in the middle of the break into the initiative, I think is actually very positive in terms of what it's trying to do, and saying, look, this kind of from a feminist and from kind of a emotionally integrated perspective, all of this is part of the, there's nothing calculated about Buffy being like, I need us to be on side so I can draw on your soul. Do you know what I mean? It's just this is what we need to do to go into this together. And I actually think it was quite a sweet moment when they go to confront Adam and the gang stay behind to do the Sumerian enjoining spell. And Xander's like, I don't feel good about you going in there alone. And she's like, I'm not going to be alone.
Yeah.
And that was nice. Yeah,
it was good.
That worked for me.
Yeah, and the way that specific point contributes to the conclusion of the season, i.e., using the powers, their joint powers, and calling down the first Slayer and the implications thereof for the rest of the show, that's like good shit. You know?
Yeah, and I think something which, in terms of the overall arc of the entire series, something which often gets drawn back on in terms of the final season, is that when Buffy died and came back in season 1, and Faith was called, that introduced a splinter into the Slayer line, which allowed the first to exploit that. And through that, we have a lot of the themes in season 7 of feminism and womanhood, just kind of a shared thing, etc.
Yeah.
But something which I think is maybe potentially underplayed is that this interaction where they share the burden here and also share the strength, and that provoking the first Slayer also introduces these themes of the first Slayer and this the lineage and what that means going back to the trauma that's associated with creating the Slayers. And I feel that goes hand in hand with the other things the first evil exploits in the final season, and really kind of speaks to the theme of the Slayer as a whole, because it really continually, I think, reinforces in these kind of moments that the Slayer is not just a woman who happens to kill monsters. There's something unique about that concept and about what it represents in terms of the emotional constitution and the meaningfulness of a Slayer that is unique to the show.
Yeah, no doubt. One essay I was reading over the week in terms of is about just like language and speech and the power thereof in Buffy, and it's called Staking in Tongues. It's by Karen Eileen Overbay and Lani Preston Maddow. And one of the things they say is kind of like, it's interesting here that, obviously this is one of the most explicit examples of the Scooby Gang working together, especially the Core Four. And it highlights the use or the importance of Giles here in his use of language, i.e. he can speak Sumerian, and that's one of the keys to like beating Adam here. But one other thing they said that I really liked was, finally, with her own hand, she divests Adam of his uranium core, saying, in English this time, and reverting to her punning, you could never hope to grasp the source of our power, but yours is right here. Buffy is the speech act. She is the utterance that communicates meaning, drawing on the linguistic capabilities of her companions. Invention, playfulness, contextualization, archival knowledge, compilation, and translation. Other Slayers have never confronted such a powerful foe or managed such harmonic power. They are solitary and silent. Kendra rarely speaks, and when she does, she is deferential, formal, and clearly uncomfortable. The first Slayer is unable to speak and must use Tara as a voice. Solitary warriors do not need language, they need only to kill. But Buffy is able to survive longer than the other Slayers because she's embedded in language and because she embodies language. I thought it was very interesting. Really important point.
I think it's relevant there that Buffy confronts a series of challenges more than any other Slayer has had to. Like we only ever get the sense that Slayers have confronted a particularly old vampire or maybe a mid-tier demon as kind of their final challenge, but Buffy really deals with quite broad issues in her tenure. Absolutely.
And one of the main reasons for that is like just the concepts of family and group dynamics in this show is so strong. So in this episode we get two very distinct families, I think, family units. So we have a very clear Scooby Gang who approach in a way that is very natural. They've been fractured from within to some degree, but their bonds that hold them together is much stronger than the the trivial issues that kind of can push them apart. And they also, it's very important to note that they don't revert to, from going forward from here, they don't revert to their pre-college Scooby approach to things.
Yes.
You know, Xander goes out and gets a job and is that little bit separate from the group with Anya. Willow continues in college while Buffy drops out. Buffy has to take care of Dawn, and that's kind of like a separating factor as well. So it's an adaptation in the way that family is not about seeing someone every day. It's about a stronger bond than that.
I think equally in the initiative, we see a kind of classic nuclear family model, obviously based around Atom's uranium core.
Okay. That was
Does it frustrate you
that was atomically awful.
This is causing some fission.
If you don't fucking stop, I'm going to have a meltdown, I swear. Okay. Yeah, definitely a more like, I'm going to suggest a more like masculine family structure. Our dynamics of, we'll talk about science versus magic in a minute, but like science versus magic, you know, the found family, the genuine, almost queer notion of family being the people who are most important to you in your chosen family, versus this kind of almost presumed and like heteronormatively repetitive and like I'm trying to say that basically the family structure that's in the military really benefits the military. You know, it doesn't benefit the members, it benefits the sense that like, yeah, it doesn't benefit the members, it benefits the structure itself. And yeah, so you see that, like, you know, Adam is creating a family by force in the way that the military does in this episode, by physically constructing them, molding them to his will, having his family adapt to him rather than the family members all adapting to each other. And that's obviously reflected in how Riley is conditioned and literally controlled by Walsh. In this episode, we see that she has implanted a chip near his heart, in his thoracic something, or nerve or something. Yeah,
apparently he's been chipped the entire season.
I want to talk about that in a second, because I think that there's something to be talked about there. But so you, you have like a very weak form of family and bond, which is by force and through threat of violence and dismissal if you don't comply, and then the Scooby one, which is evolving, adaptive, affectionate, and they're like a language of co-equals, and yeah, it's great. It's a nice little metaphor in there.
It's absolutely resilient, and I think you're absolutely right that what we're seeing, I don't think Buffy says anything new about military, but I think what it does is use military hierarchy, which is replicated in so many parts of normative society, as like this could be a sawmill. Do you know what I mean? It's still the same structure. So I think you're absolutely right that what the military is representing is kind of a hegemonic kind of top-down structure, which benefits the structure, but is rigid and is inflexible. And with what we see, how quickly they dissolve, and also the fact that like the three representative voices, or some of the most representative voices in Forrest, Riley, and Graham, have no real bond to each other when that structure isn't there. Whereas what the Scoobies have is more radial, in the sense that it's decentralized as such. It can resist damage. It can reconfigure around scar tissue. It has all this kind of adaptability to it. Whereas we very like a knock you over the head imagery. You have Adam constructing from these ill-fitting parts these different creatures, and ultimately that doesn't fit or work. And anything that is made in this way, be it the Walsh zombie, or be it what Riley is, or Adam, or all these kind of things, they're ill fitted together, and they kind of collapse almost immediately under their own weight, or in Forrest's case, because he very intentionally decided to blow himself up, as far as I'm concerned. Well,
no, Riley planned for him to blow himself up. It was bizarre. So yeah, it was interesting, this episode. I mean, Mark Field suggests that this episode really brings home the idea of that we talked about in the first episode of the season, which was a lot about M. Somerset Maugham's of human bondage, and the kind of existential crisis that introduces. Should you follow what is expected of you in society? It is the easiest, it's the most comfortable, or should be true to yourself. Riley has to very specifically choose to reject the heteronormative military structure in favor of and like sever his links with his metaphorical mother and his metaphorical brother in favor of a found family and a more loose structure. Funny enough, he will not reject it for very long. But so that's very interesting. So Riley just cuts the fucking he's still has his muscles controlled by this chip, and at the same time manages to cut it out of his chest.
It 100% smacks to me as, looking at this I was trying to think of a way to say this which doesn't sound incredibly wanky, but my first thought was like, as someone who has written things, do you know what I mean? You're looking at this and like this, they got so far into this and they're like, we need a reason why he would dramatically turn up in Adam's place at the end of the last episode, and
isolate Buffy
and then not really, like, literally be incapable of contributing until the moment the plot there. And they were like, what if he was also chipped? And then Adam was like, and I just
chipped for everyone.
Yeah, I know, the party pack. But Adam literally was like, yes, you've been chipped, but I didn't turn it on until just now. Do you know what I mean? It's very like...
So like that does call to question, like, was Walsh controlling Riley the whole time? I mean, she does say when Riley's talking to Buffy when they first start going out, she says to him, he says to her, oh, Professor Walsh really likes you. She liked you before I did even. Mm-hmm. And stuff like that. And like, Riley's approach to, like, falling in love with Buffy was very much like, it's almost like something shifted one day,
chemically induced to a certain degree.
So it's kind of like it calls into question, was Riley being controlled and conditioned from the very start to even the degree that he wanted to go out with Buffy?
I think that's ambiguous. I think what we find from Riley in the long run is, both literally and metaphorically, so much of his personality, so much of his actions are interwoven with what the initiative is. That when you take that away, there's not a lot left, where for someone like Angel, like, that was transcendent of anything specific that was happening. So I don't think he would necessarily be with Buffy if all the other factors hadn't put it in the perfect conditions.
For sure.
And that's not a relationship, that's just happenstance to a certain degree. I don't think there's anything ill-fitted or malevolent there. It's just not anything more than what it is. And like, definitely for someone who is like, Riley is not only a main character in this season, but he's also the main character when it comes to the initiative. Mm-hmm. For the climax of the initiative arc, for him to be strapped to a chair and not be able to do anything for most of the episode. Like, I know it's the Buffy show, but still, like, that's kind of not great for his character.
Yeah, it really isn't.
Like, Forrest did more than he did. Help, Maggie Walsh was walking around for more of the episode than he was.
Yeah, and she had big, like, tubes full of cherry, like, juice running around her and everything. Yeah,
and what was it? At one point when Buffy gets captured, the kill the Slayer plan is allow Maggie Walsh to advance on her slowly with a pizza cutter.
Yeah, and she just, they obviously are like, oh, forgot she had legs, because she just kicks them.
Yeah. And then when Buffy does confront Adam, he fires a grenade launcher at her at the exact moment that the enjoining spell happens to work. So there's ways to present all that stuff where it's like, God, they're all fighting for their lives, fighting by the skin of their teeth, and luckily it all comes together just in time. This read more like this scene only works in this exact order. You decided that the ending was she's going to turn into Uber Buffy at this moment and worked backwards, and it feels like something played, like, recorded in reverse and played forwards a little bit.
I mean, like, even like, I don't mean to be that guy who picks apart like just the plan that they make, but the plan is that she'll go in there and fight Adam as Uber Buffy, and that's how she'll win. Mm-hmm. What she does is she goes in, she sees Riley, and she's like, oh fuck, and she just like goes to help him. He just sits there looking at her doing nothing, and then she gets captured, and she fights Adam non-powered for a few minutes and then goes ahead.
Specifically, the Scooby stage, where how long would this spell take to take effect? And Jaws says it takes about 5 minutes. She's like, well, I better go leave now.
Yeah, why not leave in 5 minutes when you can just like walk? Anyway,
it's really frustrating to listen to that, because there probably are some good reasons why she couldn't, but like,
I don't give a shit.
5 minutes.
But one of the shots was that he fires an artillery shell out of his newly upgraded cannon arm, which just like
tracks for me. Yeah.
Anyway,
he has a Gatling gun as well, which is
cool. He shoots a bomb on her anyway, and Uber Buffy kind of like waves her hand and turns it into some doves, and I think it was probably the best CGI on the show so far. It was really seamless and actually quite effective.
Yeah, like particularly for the time, but just in general, that seeing of her, and I think as we highlighted, The Matrix came out not too long before this episode because she does bullet time, stops some bullets in midair, waves them away, and then turns a shell into some doves, and it's like for all the jankiness of the rest of it, I always thought Uber Buffy was cool.
Yeah, me too.
The idea of the enjoining spell and the theme, which we'll talk a little bit about, of you could never understand what this is, and then just using that CGI and then destroying him. That's still a very effective Buffy imagery for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think with that confrontation between Buffy and Adam, forgot the name of our main characters there for a second, we get a combination of, I think, the most substantive science v magic argument we have in the show. There's a little bit of it later with the trio and all that, but that's kind of dinky. You know, this is actually, I think, reasonably effectively presenting the idea that the military, with their really broadly acted plan, the Pentagon, are
lack of like engagement with the actual information and the knowledge that's available, because they, to the very end, refused to see the demons as anything other than hostiles, faceless, and also like if they had stood back for a second to see, oh, maybe these things could plan something, they would be able to see that there is a plan going on there, that's they're being Trojan horsed.
And sometimes the broadest themes that can be most effective, and what we have here is they've come to Colonel McNamara with an exact explanation of what's happening, but frankly, because there's a young woman standing there saying this is what's happening, I know more about it than you do, that will never register. And there's a fairly effective scene where the military lag is like, you know, who are you to come in here and tell me my business? And she's like, this is my business. This is primeval forces that you'll never understand, but I will, because I'm the Slayer. And I think it does a good thing of like conveying the idea that something can be ineffable and uncategorizable without being unknown or without substance, and there is something which just can't be written down about what Buffy's trying to encapsulate about that motive energy of you know, the willpower that comes from the Slayer and all that kind of stuff, which I think is really, really effective. And I think they do a good job of highlighting how certain kinds of empirical science just can't be applied to things which are not, but things that are outside of science, which are more to do with the, you know, parts of the psyche or parts of interpersonal relations which aren't hard sciences, you know, and that's really missing from how the initial approach to all this. And I think it's a good way to, otherwise you have a case where the Scoobies should be massively overpowered by the military industrial complex, but they actually have something that the initial don't. Yeah, I
think for me, what the kind of the conflict really stands on here is not that science is useless, it's that the application in this cold masculine and brute forcing and pig-headed kind of ways, whereby you don't really engage with the knowledge that is there and the context and the it's a blunted instrument. So yeah, it's an interesting one. So, a couple of other things before we move into the dusting. There's a really nice scene at the beginning of the episode where Anya and Xander are hanging out in bed, and Xander is very depressed because he feels useless and crap. And Anya comes along and says, "Oh, you know, are you still worrying about that? You should stop worrying about that because it was like hours ago. And I think you're really great and I love you, so that should matter." And he's like, "Oh, yeah." And it's actually really sweet, very sincere. Emma Caulfield did a great job. She's been really underutilized this season, I think. I
think this is one of the scenes that has most sold the Xander-Anya relationship to me so far.
No doubt.
Because not that it's been poorly acted at any point, but just that it does convey that Anya gives Xander something which he sorely needs, which he can't get from his friends. It's not aggrandizing, it's not a necessary validation, but it's just it allows him to move his center a bit away from their center, and like gives Xander something an arc to develop. And I think often those arcs are very specifically, you know, boring in the sense it's like, oh, it's romance and he has a relationship, and that's all it is. But because she is actually a fully formed character, it gives just kind of new options, I think, which are I'm kind of looking forward to.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to just the rest of Buffy in general. I've thoroughly enjoyed season 4. It hasn't given me that like excitement. And anyway, we'll talk about all that like next week.
I'm massively looking forward to the next 3 seasons because they are just so much less known to me than these.
Oh, really?
Like I've seen them, obviously I have, but like they're not engraved in my brain. So I think it's gonna be like kind of like new episodes of Buffy a little bit.
Getcha. Season 5 I know very, very well. Season 6 I know pretty well. I would say about the equivalent of season 4 for me. And season 7 I probably know as I don't hugely know. I've probably seen every episode like 3 times at most.
Yeah, I feel like that for the next 3 seasons, the ones which are really crystallized for me are the openers and the enders, and some of the tempo episodes. But that's kind of it.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then the last thing, Spike it does manage to get into the good graces of the Scoobies in the end by being like, "Oh, well, I'm here. Should be grand," and they're like, "Yeah, it'll be fine."
Yeah, he really has. He really has made a transition from murderer to rascal.
He really has. He's just like, oh, don't mind silly old me.
Yeah. But I have to say, James Marsters.
Don't mind Billy old me.
James Marsters comes to every scene with just full on energy. He just takes it all on first principles.
He's pretty good. I'm never going to be a Spike stan, but James Marsters does a pretty good job of it.
I think he's more fun consistently than Angel is.
Yes, for sure. I would agree with you on that. Okay, the dusting, because we're actually running pretty long on this. Buffy Bits. I think I've kind of given a lot of mine already, to be honest. I just noticed now that I forgot to look at any of the fashion for the episode, pretty much. Oops. But yeah, the beginning of the episode felt quite disconnected. It felt like a montage of scenes. I thought that was kind of appropriate for the separate characters, Oh yeah, there was a shot where Maggie Walsh and her assistant, whose name I can't remember,
Professor Frances Engelman,
lovely, are standing very specifically recreating American Gothic, which is the painting, which was really odd.
Now, do I say professor or professus?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
The montage was just wild.
Yeah, so basically at the end of the episode there is a bit like, oh, and there was a massive battle and everyone died and then John was a zombie, and we literally see the substitute initiative representative Carl McNamara, who I perhaps uncharitably think was probably played by an actor who's never played a military role before.
Yeah, I
didn't
agree,
really have that presence. Just get mauled to death. Apparently, as you said, 40% of the initiative were killed. And then we have the Pentagon represented by men in suits in room with table, saying fill it with concrete.
Which they don't do.
They don't do.
They got back there in season 7, I do believe. Yeah, there's a point where Buffy does a quad kick in the air while Uber Buffy, and I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Nice one. And we noted this during the episode, but there's a lot of similarities in this show, in the scenes in this episode to Cabin in the Woods, which was also written by Joss Whedon, which is a great movie.
Yeah.
You should go watch it if you can. Particularly
when the initiative seals go down, and all the demons get out. That's kind of pretty one for one what happens in Cabin in the Woods, essentially.
Absolutely.
So something I want to note is I read that by this point in the show they've refined the dusting technique.
Oh, great.
To the extent that it costs $5,000 every time you dust someone.
Oh, good.
But they do get from this point on more complex in the sense that you see people getting
skeleton,
but also just like pinned by chopsticks while they're flying through the air. Like it's always like it becomes more of a gag, staking rather than just a staking for a lot of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Which I enjoy. Spike puts a cigarette out in Forrest's eye, which is unusually vicious.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about Forrest, but just that I've always remembered his kind of half yellow demon head as just like not a great bit of costume work.
No, and they also like just the elements of it is disgusting. He also just cannot speak in it, which is a great sign.
His lower jaw doesn't move, and he bizarrely says something where now Agam has done this. There's like a moment of hesitation crosses his face, and he says, "Oh, my doubts are gone." It's like, you had no doubts.
Yeah, you're always very dogmatic.
You were completely the whole way through entirely dogmatic.
Yeah. When Riley sees him, he's like, "Forrest, oh God," and Forrest responds, "God has nothing to do with it." And I was like, this is what people think atheists are like.
And yeah, some
that made it sound like I'm like some atheist right activist. I'm not. That would be bad.
I also enjoy that when Giles wakes up the next day massively hungover, he has a wet towel on the back of his neck, which is like a real boomer hangover
Disgusting.
cure.
Disgusting. Talking of fashion, yeah, Giles does answer the door in his robes to a very hungover to Willow and Tara, and asks them not to type very loud because his head is so sore. And otherwise, I do not remember any of the fashion of the episode. I know that Willow was wearing a weird cat on her t-shirt at one point, and it was a pink t-shirt. And I know that there was a guy with one of those like military sweaters, knit kind of like military things. And I was like, oh, that's kind of nice.
I always think it's funny how we talk about so consistently fashion in the show, but we don't necessarily have the words to talk about fashion. Because I was like, it's pretty cool that Uber Buffy kills Adam while wearing a halter top. I was like, I don't think that's what that is. I don't think that's the word.
You mean a top?
No, I don't. I mean like a frilly kind of bushy kind of thing.
Bushy.
I can't.
Okay.
I can't describe fashion.
Wonderful.
She looked well.
She did look well. Great. Okay, well, let's move swiftly forward. Death count, Joel. List out all the deaths, please.
List every initiative member who died.
It's the most death-filled episode of the show, I think.
That would make sense, yeah. Oh, fuck me. I had it a second ago. Primeval. Okay. So, yes, probably one of the most calamitous death counts of the show. 40% of the initiative are killed by the demons freed by Adam. Notably, there's someone bitten by a vampire. There's a tentacle demon who kills a scientist. Colonel McNamara is mauled by a werewolf-looking demon. A number of demons die when they escape from the cages as well. Both Maggie Walsh and Francis Engelman are re-killed when Riley Finn tears out their life-giving tubes. Forrest is blown up because he chose to die. And Adam is finally killed by Buffy, who magics away his heart.
Sure fucking does.
Well, Buffy and all the Scoobies. I think we'll give them all the kill for that. Yeah.
I agree. Okay, Joel, do you have a rating for the episode?
Yeah, I would give this episode 8.1 shattered bone spurs.
Okay.
I think it is a mess in some ways, but I think it does suffer or have the burden of being required to tie up all of this kind of stuff. I think that the strength of the episode leave me with a good taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
In the sense of I like all the Buffy and Willow stuff. I like Spike in this episode. I think he's effervescent. And I, out of all 7 seasons of Buffy, I love the enjoining spell and what it means for what the point of Buffy is. It's still very evocative for me. So I'm going to give it an 8.1. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I'm going to give it an 8.0 hungover librarians out of 10. It was I liked it. Well enough. I think it is probably hugely overlooked because the episode comes afterwards, but I totally agree. The enjoining spell, I really like that as a plot point, both for this episode and for the show. I think if you've managed to write a Buffy essay without referring to it at some point, you're doing well. Yeah, and I think it nicely sets the stage for Restless in lots of ways, but at the same time, it does suffer from a lot of the negative aspects of the season, which we've highlighted extensively. And the interaction between Buffy and Willow in the elevator shaft, I thought was really, really touching. Should we do the critically chase then, Joel?
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the name of this episode?
Blind Date.
Yeah.
Because it was about a blind person.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. So we another episode of Angel in
Very
terms
unusual.
of what's happened so far.
Structurally bizarre.
Yeah. So but interesting in some ways. So the motive of the episode is a case about a blind woman
who's an assassin
who can kill people. But the gotcha is like, how can she kill people if she's blind? And there's just a lot of that going on.
And it's just like, actually she can see.
Yeah, we've all seen Daredevil. Do you know what I mean?
Except for you haven't seen Daredevil.
I've watched 2 seasons of the program.
True, but you haven't seen the movie.
No, I haven't. I keep asking to put it on. We don't put it on.
I've seen that movie maybe 500 times.
In the episode, that's what gets us started, but really what the episode is about is taking Lindsay, who's our representative character in Wolfram and Hart, the evil law firm, and really expanding on how the Wolfram and Hart stuff works. So we actually see a lot of this in later seasons, but if you think about it now, this is the first time they've introduced kind of really the whole interior of the building, the kind of the gags about the security guards having stakes on their batons and all that kind of stuff. So
a lot of that was kind of fun.
Yeah, like that stuff is like, that's world building in kind of just the jokiest sense, and I kind of like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a An arc essentially, kind of about this assassin, but really more about that Angel's starting to get frustrated with the fact that he can't really do anything in his city to deal with this crime because they keep getting the monsters off in court. But Lindsay has a change of heart, well, not a change of heart, but a crisis of confidence about the firm, because
Conscience.
What did I say?
Confidence.
Okay, crisis of conscience. He's less confident as well. Because they're going to kill these immortal children who are going to bring about a prophecy, etc., etc. So he comes to Angel. He's like, Angel, this is bad news, bear. And he's like, I have to do this because I'm really poor and I grew up in the Dust Bowl in 1930s America.
Yeah, and one winter during flu season, our 7-child family went to 4.
Yeah.
It's like... Did he grow up in the 30s?
Yeah, and Angel's just like, snore, don't care. Which I thought was quite funny. But they concoct a plan together where it's like a heist. They do a heist. They break into Wolfram Heart. They get gunned to bring out a vampire to the lobby to confuse the vampire detectors. He says a lot of thing about how, you'll... get off the dead man and the demon man, but not the black man. And it's like, please stop writing these lines. They're incredibly painful. But that kind of fun is jaunty. Angel's in a suit while wearing welding glasses at one point. And we also
he looked really funny wearing welding glasses. He looked like a Toad from X-Men 1.
Yes, absolutely. It also introduces Holland Manners, I believe is his surname, Holland anyway, who is the manager at Wolfram Heart, becomes a significant character for season 2. So that's all quite fun. And then specifically Lindsay, having had this crisis of conscience, gets a promotion at the end of the episode and doesn't come to the side of light and continues to be a villain. And then the bizarre, I think the conclusion of the Blind One plot is that there's this whole like Tyrannosaurus Rex thing where Angel realizes that she can't see. She's trained by Tibetan monks to kill people or whatever.
She can see radioactive waves instead of...
Yeah, she can see movement as a snake might, but not... She sees on a different wavelength. So if he stays absolutely still in between punching her, she can't see him. So it's like he's preternaturally able to stand still. Fascinatingly, I did find out that it's presenting in like Predator vision, like it looks like heat vision, but they didn't have the money to do that CGI, so they actually painted the actors in glow-in-the-dark paint and turned off the lights. Which I just think is fascinating.
Yeah.
And then one of the most critical elements of it is while in the course of this heist, he feels himself drawn towards an object in the Wolfram Heart vault, which is the Shangshu prophecy. And it tells of a vampire with a soul who will Shangshu and then be made human. And Shangshu is a Sanskrit word which in the prophecy, which means both to live and to die.
Yeah.
And this is the motive main quest that explains away a lot of what Angel does for the powers to be for the rest of the show. And then eventually when Spike is introduced, maybe he's the vampire with the soul. So they really use this as the backbone of his divine redemption arc. Yeah. Going forward, so significant in that fashion. But otherwise, other than setting up the confrontation between him and Wolfram Heart, it doesn't really lend anything to the season conclusion. So there's some interesting world building, not really any Cordelia in it, not really any Wesley in it. So I give it maybe a 7 for feminist gestures.
Yeah, so my thought about it was that like it kind of mashed a couple of different things in together. Mm-hmm. Like for one, it did this thing where it went from Angel's perspective to Lindsay's perspective and back in a way that kind of made you want to kind of shift your allegiance to what's it I say? Wesley? No, I meant Lindsay. To Lindsay. But it didn't really work. Yeah, it was a mishmash episode. You kind of thought it was going to be about a blind person. It was actually mostly about building up the background of Wolfram Heart a bit more. There's also a part where Lindsay gets scanned by some mind readers about like because they're trying to find who's betrayed them, and actually they end up killing the other guy because he was planning on leaving the company. But they also scanned Lindsay, so why didn't they hear all of his thoughts that were about? They
did, Brian. Like the next scene was Holland being like, "Oh, and by the way, we also found out that you've betrayed us, so I'm going to give you this opportunity to make a better choice in your life." So that was all text. You just weren't paying attention.
I wasn't paying attention. I mean, I would probably I found it a very disjointed episode. I would give it 6 out of 10 failed feminist gestures.
Sure. Personally, I like the silly parts. I like the Wolfram Heart stuff, and I like Angel being like, Maybe what I do on my show is I do bank heists. Yeah, but no television Hall of Fame for this
I would
one.
suggest that this is one of the brightest episodes of Buffy or Angel as well. There's so much sunlight. He's just walking around in the courthouse. He also fucks a pair of glasses at a blind woman in the courthouse, and she catches them. And then he runs away, but like nothing's ever said about it. None of the people in the courtroom are like, sorry.
There's an amazing bit of trivia on the Wikipedia page for this as well, the Angel wiki page, because it's like Angel comes back from the court after this and he knocks off his papers and it's like, there's nothing I can do in the legal system. Hung jury, they acquitted her. And the Wikipedia says a hung jury cannot acquit people because they didn't come to a conclusion. They are two disparate concepts, which I thought was quite funny.
Okay, let's leave it there for sure.
Absolutely. So going forward, Brian and I have started watching a very hot topical program, Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah.
So look forward to a podcast within a podcast where we discuss the hottest mystery of 1991 in between our episodes. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're as pumped as we are for Restless next week.
It's espresso pumped as we are.
Espresso pumped as we are for the end of season 4 of Buffy. It's been a wild ride, and we're looking forward to what's going to come next.
It's gonna be wild. I'm gonna have to really condense my thoughts about it because I have a lot of thoughts about Restless. Just generally, I love the episode. And also just season finales run along for us regardless because we review the season and stuff like that. So yeah, it's gonna be a long one.
It's gonna be one of our vaulted no banter episodes.
No bad stones.
But otherwise, we'll see you there. If you enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Tell your friends and tell your reanimated college professors, and we will see you next time
on Buffy Boys. Hi,
Buffy Boys. See you then. Bye.
Bye. Oh yeah, that one. I said hi.